And this is what happened when you go live and you are not ready. So this is just to prove that we do this technically, and even that this is technically episode 57, we
Yeah,
still make mistakes. So
that's all right.
welcome to Cross-Platform Podcast, where we discuss how to solve productivity problems across platforms. I'm Augusto Pinaud,
And I'm Art Gelwicks.
and we are back to discuss more about our notes and how our notes work and how we manage all this craziness. So as we were recording the last week, um, we noticed in the middle of the show that we were not doing a great job explaining. I wasn't at least doing a great job
Well,
explaining.
neither was I. I take
So
full pride in that.
and so we were okay. How can we explain this better? The decision we made for this part two of the show is okay, let's go back and work into this and figure it out how it is. And I there was a couple of things that I learned. One is my system, it was not documented, but it was not as incomplete as I thought. And that was very reassuring for me. Um, so I noticed that I divide my PDF and documents and art and things that I want to read and all that in basically four categories. Okay. One is that is actionable. Okay. What are my projects or is actionable or those kind of things? And those things seems today live mostly in my task management of choice. Okay, they are, for example, if I get tickets for this Saturday, we are going to watch Star Wars with the New Jersey Philharmonic.
Oh, that
If you
sounds like
have
fun.
never, if you have never watched a movie, they do a bunch of them. They do Indiana
Hmm.
Jones, they do Star Wars, they do Harry Potter, they do a bunch of them with the orchestra. If you have ever had you see it, go. It is worth it. Doesn't matter the movie. It is really, really an spectacle to see the orchestra playing the music live for the movie. It's incredible. So we are going to do um, Star Wars for Mother's Day. For the record, my wife picked the movie. Okay, I understand I'm the fan, but she picked the movie. Anyways, when we get those tickets, what I do is I turn them into PDF and goes directly to my task choice. So that way they will show up on the day. I will open that, show my ticket, and walk in. Okay. And that goes for anything that will require an action. Do that means that's the only place they may go? Not necessarily. They may go to a couple of places. Okay. They may go to that and they may go to an archive place in okay for me to find it quick. Normally they do not stay on inbox if I receive it. You know, the inbox email gets clean. That's not a place where I store. But I store significantly in Todoist. There is a lot of that I do in Todoist or in Nusby. So um, that's the first. The second one are the reference material. Okay, and reference material are a couple of categories: things that I want to read, okay, and that are not books. Okay, there are articles or there are PDFs. Okay, if they are online things, they live in Instapaper. Okay, and in Instapaper I have two things. One is when I haven't read anything yet, they stay on the inbox. Okay, and basically that is for me an inbox that only have things that I want to read, process, or delete. Okay, and normally there are articles, and I try to the best of my abilities once a week to go and read and process those. When I process those, when I read it, then there is two decisions. Is this article was as good as I thought it was going to be? Okay, if the answer is yes, then I file inside of Instapaper in one or more folders related to the article. Why one or more folders? Well, for example, I read an article this weekend this past weekend about an opinion article from um, 9 to 5 Mac, where they were talking about the distinction between the Mac and the Apple and why the 2% decline on Apple. So I save it on the iPad, things for the iPad, and I save it on things on Apple financials. And yes, I duplicate the article, but it's the two ways I may find that or may try to find that article later if I want to quote it. If they are not articles, they are PDFs, okay? And I get PDFs. I get a bunch of them to read. So they go into GoodNotes. That's where I read PDF because I can make annotations, I can save them, and then while they are active for me to read, they live into GoodNotes, okay? And that's, again, it is very, very easy to do. So it works very, very well for me.
Yeah, thinking about our conversation last week, and we were talking about specifically Instapaper and those kinds of reading tools. I did do the exercise of going back and at least looking at how I was handling my reading intake,
right,
and specifically managing that. And I did find that I made some changes this week that have become very helpful. Now, if you listened to last week's show, you know that I use OneNote to manage my reading intake. I've tried other solutions. I've tried Pocket. I've tried Instapaper, but OneNote is where I live primarily, and I keep going back to that tool no matter what other tools I use. So that's the best starting place for me. The structure within OneNote, I have one notebook that is my intake point for things to read. Everything I want to read goes into that one notebook. Inside that notebook, OneNote supports a thing called section groups and sections, just like you have with a 3-ring binder. Well, I've always used just the sections. So I had a section for finance, one for automotive, one for workshop, one for Chromebook, and I had sections all over the place, which is fine. Everything I go to read goes into a first section, which is articles to read. I go through that review, and then if I'm going to keep it, I move it to the corresponding section that it's applicable to. But I realized there was a step I could take it higher that would make it much more useful. So what I did is I created section groups for personal, professional, home, and then moved my sections into those section groups. Now you're going, okay, well, that's fine. It's just another layer. But it allows me to take advantage of a feature in OneNote as part of their search capability. Within OneNote, when I go in and search, I can search at the section level, the section group level, and the notebook level. So I can start in a section, let's say finance, and look for something on personal investment. Let's say credit cards. Fine. I can search there. If I don't find it there, I can actually go up a level to the personal section group and see if it's in another topic area, something else. It may be in investments, or it may be in related to who knows what. If I still can't find it there, I can go up to the top level and search the entire notebook. Or I could search all my notebooks that are open at one time. So I can leverage all of those. But by creating that structure, it has made it a lot easier for me to frame up what the purpose of something, an article that I'm getting and keeping, is for. What am I going to use that for? If it's professional, if it's about Chromebooks, it could be a podcast fodder. Now, the flip side is, because of how the notebook structure works and the ability to create links to pages within OneNote, I've now gotten much better at creating index pages. So if I find an article related to Chromebooks that I want to talk about later on, maybe on a show, I can grab that link and put it on the show page. I don't need to duplicate the article, but I can create that cross-reference link in OneNote. And then I have that there and I know it drills down. So just that little shift has helped quite a bit in handling my intake process of capturing things. I'm sure it's still got a ways to go, but the upside is that structure now translates to every device that I have. I can see the same structure on my tablet, on my phone, on my desktop. It just makes life easier to be able to know that I can say, yeah, I want to look at this stuff for my car, and I can drill all the way in and see it and have it grouped that way.
That is awesome. And then, as I said, the good notes that keeps, and then the last part of that are books. I get a lot of, hey, read this book, recommendations for books, and all this. And initially, I have them in the Kindle, and the Kindle can synchronize, but the problem is they get lost. So I begin making a list. What is this? What I'm reading? This is what I ought to read, and I have it that, and that is a third category for reference. Okay, on those notes. My final category for those notes is Apple Notes. Apple Notes. And again, I have a bunch of folders. Okay. At the beginning of this episode, we laugh because I open a note in this that is under the cross platform folder where is the introduction of the show. Okay. And I had it open. It wasn't open. I was like, sort of like, oops, we are live. Okay. But that's where it lived. And I have a bunch of them. Do I search? Yes. Do I use search? Yes. But
Mm.
that allows me to find there. And a lot of times I put things in, when I look on the project area, I have those three things, to do is Nusby, Good Notes, and the notes, the Apple Notes. Why? Because it's simple. It's really easy for me to have it in the two places and find it one place or the other. Notes have the advantage that I can share that, especially with my wife. No, it's not always easy to share. Apple Notes is easy. I can send her a text and go from there. And then finally is the archiving of the information. So what I want to do with this information. And the archiving of the information, again, lived in three places for me. One is Apple Notes. Okay. There are things we have in there that is just archived at this point. The other part is Evernote. And I have a bunch of things on Evernote. And as I was researching for this episode, I start considering, and I haven't made a decision, but I created a
Mhm.
project to evaluate if I should still keep Evernote or Evernote should disappear and save the $50 a year. And then the other thing is Dropbox. Dropbox is where the other big thing where all my ebooks live, and I have a folder called ebooks that has a bunch of them. And I have courses and movies and stuff. So I have a pretty vast collection. And then, as I was saying, once a quarter, I go there because sometimes I get a new book and then I just dump it in there, but don't necessarily sort it in the way that I want it for the future. So once a quarter, I tend to go in there, spend time on that folder, and clean it up in the way I like and have it all clean, pristine, and organized. Um, I was very impressed after I went into the detail. One, how many little applications I use. I was expecting that they were going to be a lot more applications, but end
Mhm.
up being really my task management, good notes, and I love good notes, Apple Notes, and then Instapaper, Dropbox, and Evernote. But what I was more impressed about it was for a process that lacked documentation, in my case, how easy and well was working across every device that I have. So I was
That's
very
good.
pleased with that.
Do you think that comes from just real time tuning it as you've been using it rather than planning in advance? I mean, it almost sounds like you've made iterative changes based on need, um, to get to the
I
point
am
that you're
very,
at.
very bad at changing apps. Very bad.
Okay.
And part of that is because I am terrified of the shiny syndrome. Okay. So when the shiny syndrome comes, the new app that is going to save my world, I tend to run the opposite direction. When
Mhm.
the real event happen, I will be the first one to die, because of that. I will not install this app to save your life. Let me think about that. And I play with a lot of apps. It's not that I don't play with them, but I don't move my data. I'm very slow to move my data.
Yeah,
Very,
that's
very slow.
and that's a really common problem because you get into applications. I have the same situation with Evernote that you have right now. I have an Evernote account that's still active and it has a massive quantity of stuff in it. But that's all really old stuff. I haven't actively touched Evernote in a number of years. But that means that I have to dedicate some time to sit down and go through all the things that are in there and decide, do I want to keep them? Do I not want to keep them? To get to the point where I can make the decision, can I get rid of the app or not? And
Correct.
I actually posted out on LinkedIn this week the question, how many apps or applications do you have that duplicate functionality in other applications that you think you could do away with? And I was surprised. A fair number of people came back and said, 2 or 3 or 4 different applications that they could probably go do away with because they overlap the functionality of applications they use all the time. And it's a struggle as you start to establish all of this structure. It becomes a challenge. So,
It is a challenge. And not only is a challenge, one of the things is, and this is start on my productivity, on my task manager, is I see at the beginning so many people moving from A, B, C, and D that at the end they didn't know where in the information was. And for me, it's so important not to lose that information. I don't want to come right now and say, okay, I have a half an hour to clean something, and then said, okay,
mhm,
where are the articles I'm going to read? Okay. And I don't want to think, oh well, I don't have the Kindle. Oh, I don't have, no. If I'm going to open the Kindle, normally it's the book I'm reading. And if in doubt, I can go to my task manager and it will tell me what I need to read. When I want to
right.
read the articles, they are all in Instapaper. And if they are articles there in the inbox, that means it's not. The good thing is I know that's something that at least at some point I say I want to read. I may start reading and say, "Oh, dump it." Okay, I don't care. But at least at some point, I was interested in reading. Same thing if I open Goodreads. Okay, Goodreads, the PDFs that are in there is the stuff that I have said I want to read. So there is some kind of structure.
Yeah, and I think the same way when we talk about structure and we talk about getting our notes organized, we have this inherent underlying problem, which is, and we talked about this earlier, the abstract nature of notes prevents them from fitting in the proverbial, square hole in the box. Some of them are silly shaped, some of them are oval, some of them are round. They don't always fit into the predefined structures. So we have to make sure that of all the things that we do, I think note taking is the one that we have to be most forgiving of. And our structures have to be the most forgiving of. So, one of the challenges that I've run into this week, and this is an extension of last week's conversation, is I've gone through the mental battle of should I be using Notion to take my notes? Now, I've been using Notion for quite a while and I've built a lot of content in Notion, but honestly, I don't know that it's necessarily the best note taking tool. It's a very good tool for building out application, low code or no code style applications to do a lot of support work and to do a lot of operational work. But for the flexibility that I get with a tool like OneNote that is designed for freeform note taking, as compared to something like Notion, it doesn't fly the same way. So I've made the move to stop capturing my notes into Notion. I'm going to use Notion purely as an operational platform, but it is not a note taking tool by any stretch. If there are notes to be taken, I'll put references in Notion that point to the content that I have in OneNote, but I'm not going to retain it actually in Notion. And that's for another primary reason too. Notion is not the best at allowing you to get stuff out of there should you need to. Being able to print and output and do various functions like that, it struggles with that. So
Because it's challenging.
it is.
It is challenging. It is many of these process. The problem is when they happen, okay, when you lose them, how critical is what you are losing?
Mm-hmm. Now I did come up with a trick this week. I don't know why it happened, but it happened, and I'm going to do it all the time now. We've talked about in the past about how we do digital inking on our tablets. What I've started doing, because I use digital inking in OneNote to capture things, because it's very good at being able to allow me to search my handwriting. I've started writing only down the right-hand side of the page. I leave the left half of the page open. And you think, okay, well, why am I wasting all that space? Well, what I started doing was, because the handwritten pages sync in OneNote and then I can get to them from the desktop, I go in, pull the page up, and then I will type in on the left-hand side of the page any notes from my handwritten section to clean it up. And then if I don't need the handwritten section anymore, I can just delete it and not have to worry about that and have just the text-based output. But splitting it side by side like that has really made it convenient to be able to go in, capture content, reorganize it, move it around, restructure it, and really produce something that is a clean output. The second thing that I've started doing with digital inking is recognizing that it's not actually ink. And I think that was part of my problem. When you look at a notebook and you go in and you take notes in a notebook, where you take them is where they stay. That's it. That size, that layout, that text, that color, they're fairly permanent, unless you're using a friction pen, which I absolutely love. But if you're using digital ink, you can go back and change your mind. You can go back and strike content. You can resize it in most cases, drag it around to different positions, make things fit in better structures, create new structures on the page and move the pieces around. I've found giving myself permission to edit the note page after the fact has made it far more useful than what it has been in the past. Now I have these note pages that not only have the information I need that I just captured quickly, but if I go back and clean them up, one, the handwriting recognition gets much better. And I take great pride in the quality of my handwriting, so the computer should not struggle with my handwriting. If you're someone who you struggle with your own handwriting, taking that time to go back and clean it up can be a huge benefit. But second, it gives me that opportunity to put structures in the pages that I haven't had in the past. And it gives me a lot of flexibility and capability in integrating the digital ink into the overall system.
Oh, I have a question for you in that, because I thought about the digital ink, and I don't, and my handwriting is awful. And I have, that's the first issue why handwriting will not be the main thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So whatever I handwrite, I need to process. And
Right.
therefore, I don't count store into any of that, because most of that, unless they're a drawing, okay, I need to convert, because otherwise the handwriting, nobody will be able to read. Is your handwriting good enough to keep it?
It is in many cases. I could if I wanted to. I mean, I don't really have a problem. If I go back and do a search after the fact, I'd say about 90 to 95% of the time, the text search will locate my handwritten text. But that's where I'm using that trick from earlier, where I'm only writing down the right half of the page. Because then what I can do is I can go back and key in the details. And then just, if I want to keep the handwritten block for reference, I can just take it and drag it to the bottom of the page. Or if I want to throw it out, I can throw it out as well. But I have the flexibility of both.
Using can convert that handwritten text automatically?
There's a couple of applications. Yeah. There's a couple of applications that I have that can do that. Samsung Notes will do that. Also, an application called Nebo will do that, where you can point them at the handwritten text you've generated and it will convert it to typewritten text. I would say that's probably about 70 to 75% accurate. You do a lot of editing and cleanup as it tries to interpret your handwriting. Samsung Notes has some nice features where it has a handwriting to text on the fly function. So as you're writing, it's converting it. But again, you still have those edit pieces that you need to get to.
Apple and I do that now, but the problem is that it slows me down so much that it breaks the enjoyment. I once in a while come and pull the iPad and just handwrite, journal or write or thinking. Yeah. But the moment I try to convert, and I have tried that, remove, for me to wait for you to catch up, you already killed the process for me.
I have come to remind myself that digital inking is, for all intents and purposes, an analog process. Even though it's on a digital platform, it's an analog process. It has variations between 0 and 1 as you generate your lettering and your characters. And depending on the angle you're sitting at and the position of the tablet, your handwriting is going to change and vary. And we fight to make that conform something coherent enough that the computer can then convert it for us. Well, I don't know that I necessarily need it to convert it for me, because if I was using paper notebooks, I'd have to read my own handwriting. Paper notebook's not going to convert it for me. So why is that a feature that I have to have? It's a nice feature, don't get me wrong. It saves a little time. But I don't know that necessarily that time saving is creating added value, which is, it's a much deeper conversation in this, but it goes back to the entire premise of working less. If you feel that you have to go through and convert things to a textual format, well, you might as well capture them that way in the first place. If you're going to capture it in an analog format, can it stay that way? Is that okay?
Right.
And sometimes you can do both. I have found that I do this quite a bit now. I will handwrite notes and then I go back in, and because the handwritten notes are treated kind of like an image, I'll grab the entire image block, slide it about 6 rows down on the page, and then just type almost a summary at the top of it as to what the heck this is. That's all I need. That's clean, clear, and I have my details, and I have literally the original set of notes as well as my summary clarification that's available there at the top of the page. It's the best of both worlds. So,
Yeah, but you see, you bring a point, and as I was doing mine, I have the note in here. What's going to be the future of digital note for you? And I don't have an answer to that question. Okay. Because right now, again, the digital gets somehow processed and will end up in one of these 3 buckets. Will end up as a reference on the Apple Notes, will end up as an archive on Evernote or Apple Notes. Okay. But what is the future on this? Because I see digital notes coming more and more. I don't have it. Yes, I live on the Apple ecosystem and I'm not moving out. But if Apple comes with a phone with the notes ability, okay, I may stop carrying with me the iPad mini.
Well, now wait though, and I'm going to spin something at you.
Yeah.
What I was doing earlier this week and taking advantage of this note combination. On my phone, I had my OneNote folder up with my things to read, and I was going through the articles that I wanted to review. And as I found an article that it was interesting and I was reading it, I had my tablet there with me with my stylus, and I was taking notes on the articles. So after the fact, if I found that I liked the notes that I took and they were important for that particular article, I had 2 options then. I could create a link from the article to my notes and vice versa, create a link from my notes to the article, or I could just copy my notes and paste them right into the base of the article and have both sets of information. That became really useful quickly because it gave me an opportunity to not only absorb and process the information, but also manipulate it and figure out how it was going to be most effectively used for me. And it gave me that opportunity to brainstorm on some of the things and cross and connect things. So again, the flexibility of the digital platform for note-taking, I think we get ourselves into a situation where we try to put too much structure around it too quickly. And we don't take advantage of the fact that our brains are very good at free-form connection. They're very happy to take A and C and F and connect them together and turn it into something completely different.
Right. And that's where the simplicity helps. And one of the things that you and I discussed in somewhere else, I think, but is last week as my main machine died, I needed to be replaced. There was a lot of questioning also where my iPad mini plays a role. Do they actually come to update? Because I now want to be completely interchangeable, in a much stronger way than what I can do now. And that reading, I discovered most of my reading happened on that mini, not in the big one. And I question, to why. Because there are certain things that will be more comfortable, on the large screen. And it's not a
Mhm.
matter of weight or not carrying the machine. It's something that my brain decide at some point, this is a reading, this is not for reading, and may need to be reevaluated.
Well, and that's, as you mentioned, that the ability to use the platforms effectively from a hardware and a software perspective can be eye-opening. There was a point where my phone had to go on the charger because I kill my phone battery a lot. So I had just my tablet. So I'm like, I want to keep doing what I was doing, and I want to take notes, and I want to keep reading. So how am I going to do this? All I did is I turned my tablet to landscape mode. By flipping it on its side, since my notes or the things to read sit in OneNote, I then zoomed out a little bit so that the article was on the left-hand side and I had open space on the right-hand side to take handwritten notes. And all of a sudden, like, the clouds parted and the sun came out. And I'm like, this is exactly what I need to be doing. This is a great way to handle and process all of this information, because now I can take whatever I'm putting in here, add my own annotations to it, and not have to worry about, is it in the right spot? Has it wandered off to some other location? And the other piece with this that we haven't really talked about is the fact that if you have a structure that is truly a freeform note-taking structure and it handles images well, you now have the flexibility to use paper if you want to. And that's the thing that gets me, is to be able to go back and grab a legal pad and sit down and draw and use a bunch of markers and whatever, just for a difference in media and a difference in method, and know that I'm not going to lose it because I'm going to stand there and just snap a bunch of pictures with my phone. They're going to go right in.
That's where, for me, good notes is priceless, because
Mhm.
I can go into a meeting in good notes, okay, take all my notes in the paper, and then put the keyboard, okay, and all those chicken scratch, that is what
Mhm.
I am able to accomplish, okay, with my handwriting. I can type, connect it, and now I can print it into a PDF and archive it and call it. But that two-step process for me give me two things. One, I can be as creative, crazy
Mhm.
as I want in there, and then I did. That said, I, as I said, I marked two issues. The issue
Mhm.
one is what's going to happen with my future of my digital notes. The second thing that I noticed, that I still have a hole, that I don't, that I, even for this show, can answer, and we need to come back and do again, is mind maps and journaling. Because
Okay.
my journal live on day one. Okay, that's
Mhm.
where my journal lives. But the thinking process, what my journal has in day one, is the conclusion of that thought.
Okay.
Sometimes the thinking, the go to the mind map, the notes never make it there. Okay, I make the three
Mhm.
scratches, talk about it, go the answer, and type the answer and move on. So as I was testing another mind map application that I really like for certain purposes, I was looking at mine and say, for the love of God, I have God knows how many um, mind maps in here that I have no clue what they are.
Mhm.
And some of them are very, very poorly named. Okay, guilty of charge. But that is a big question. Now what I'm going to do is this worth it to keep or not?
Well, let's talk about mind maps. And it's kind of off on a little tangent from note taking, but it's very key to note taking because I think it's one of the best
But
ways to
I
brainstorm.
agree. Technically it's of note, but how many I have a lot of meetings where I end up being a mind map meeting
Oh, yeah.
because of the kind of meeting. That's
If you
where
ever
I
want to
collect
blow
every
somebody's
note.
mind, if they've never worked with a mind map before, pull up your mind map application on a shared screen or on a projector that has just starts with the oval in the center and just start building out from there. And they're going to look at you like, what the heck is this kind of witchcraft?
Oh, and then you go, if you have my note, you go and click outline and email it to them.
Exactly. And that's one of the biggest things. That's one of the key things that I was going to go to, is that because you generate the mind map and in most cases you can output it as a outline, I would say you do both. you dump it as an outline, and you dump it as an image file, and you put both of them in your note system. The textual based input is editable directly in your note system, and the image gives you the visual cross-reference. The only thing you can't do at that point is go back and edit it. You have to go back to the tool to actually do the editing. That said, the tool that I use for mind mapping now, and I have used consistently for a number of years, is called Simple Mind Pro for a couple of reasons. One, it does cloud support, so I can save my mind maps to a cloud save and then pull them up on my desktop, pull them up on my tablet, pull them up wherever. I can go through and do the edits, do the output to the outlines, and dump it out to a PDF or a JPEG file and drop them into my notes. The other thing, though, is regardless of what mind mapping tool you're using, I think it is critical that the mind mapping tool have the ability to link from one node to another node on a different mind map, or at least from a node to another mind map entirely. Because then what you can do is you can create layers of mind maps. If you're working with a large, complex idea, and you're working through the details and you get to something, maybe it's like an office relocation, and you start digging into the entire hardware relocation part of the process. Well, that can be pretty involved. Matter of fact, that could be its own mind map, and honestly, probably should be. But if you have a mind map for the entire master operation, and then you have a node on that mind map that says, hey, hardware inventory, that could link to the mind map that is set up just for the hardware inventory. That linking within the application is really key. And if you're going to do that, then I would say you need to look for an application that also supports HTML export. Because if you have the ability to export your mind maps as HTML, you can then pull them up through a browser, make them clickable, and you don't have to worry about how they get shared. So it's a good use case for putting mind maps to work. And we actually should probably do an episode just on mind mapping and dig into the whole thing, because I think
you need to give me a little bit more time for playing with this new app.
Oh no, absolutely. We'll wait a couple weeks. We'll put that on the radar. So anybody who's watching the show, put it on your calendar, because in a few weeks we're going to do an episode. Probably we'll do it sometime in June, maybe. An episode just on mind mapping across platforms and how to do it effectively and ways to take advantage of it. Because I think mind mapping is one of those extremely powerful, far almost criminally unused capabilities that people could really start to benefit from if they took advantage of it.
Right. Yeah. And yeah. Do we have anything else on this episode?
I think we've probably beaten up note-taking pretty well right now, but I certainly don't think we've hit the end of it. So what I'm going to ask is anybody who's listening, come over to Personal Productivity Club, come into the cross-platform group, and tell us how you manage your notes. I would love to hear some more examples as to how people, one, what types of notes that they actually consider worth dealing with, and two, what are the systems and structures they have in place to manage them? The more examples that people can see, the more likelihood you're going to find something that is close to what you're experiencing.
Awesome. And so with this, we come to the end of the show. If you are listening to this show, that means you got a big dump of shows that I've been behind onto publishing. So I'm sorry, life got in the middle, and sometimes life get the best of us. So guilty of charge. But anyways, we are coming back to our regular schedule, starting next week recording. We are going back to the news, to the show, and to the tips. And we are planning to keep it that way. So follow us where you like to listen podcasts, like us or subscribe to us, and leave a review. You can also interact with us in personalproductivity.club. And next week, we're going to talk about a couple of things. One is the www.crossplatform.com/merchandise. And now we're going to also have www.crossplatform.com/community. So you don't need to remember where is to get the Personal Productivity Club. You will be able to go that way. In the meantime, we're Augusto Pinaud on Art Gelwicks. See you next time from your favorite device.